Vishnupad Ashtatarashata Shimar Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Swami Maharaj Shila Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashata Shimar Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashata Shimar Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashata Shimar Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashata Shimar Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Maha-Bhagavat Srila Goraksharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Srila Sachid Ananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Vaishnav Sarva Bhutla Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Vada Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Raghunath Sharda Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Ki Jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vraja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradati Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kunda Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Yamuna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Ki Jai. Shinitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. And today is appearance day of Bhaktilok Paramahansa Goswami Maharaj. Srila Bharati Maharaj wrote a whole thing about him in my beloved masters. Anyhow. Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Oops. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yang Prabrajantam Apetya Krityam Dvaipayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tanmayataya Taravo Bhinedus Tang Sarva Bhuta Hridaya Munimanatosmi Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Shrindvatang Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridantasto Hyabhadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam Nashta Prayeshva Vabhatreshu Nityang Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Tavai Vasmi Narjivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvang Nayamang Charanantikam Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshay Kshiptashtakama Kamadhe Kripa Mai Tvam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dandavat pranams, Madhavi Didi, Rohit Radha Krishnan ji, Savitri Didi, Gargaraj ji, Hare Krishna. And also Indira Mataji and Rupmanji Didi will be watching after. And I wonder where Shri Mataji is. All right. Dandavat pranams to them too. Now, let's see, we read he regains his youth. Okay, so in the previous chapter 17, previous chapter, Shukadeva Goswami in chapter 15, he mentioned about the descendants of his sons, except that of the eldest son, Ayu. In chapter 17, he describes the descendants. And then, so 17, Shukadeva Goswami described the descendants of Ayu's four sons, namely Kshatriya Vridha, Raji, Rabha, and Anena. In this chapter 18, he will describe the descendants of Ayu's remaining son, Nahusha. So Nahusha had 6 sons named Yayāti, Sangyati, Ayati, Viyati. Considered that the post of so he didn't accept the kingdom, although then the next son, Yayati, became king because his father Nahusha was cursed by sage Agastya to become a python for his offense of molesting Indra's wife Shachi. Sangyati, Ayati, Viyati, and Kriti ruled Yayati. What am I reading up to? Reading up to verse 23, okay. Parikshit asked Shukadeva Goswami, I'm curious to know how this pratiloma marriage happened between a Kshatriya man, Yayati, and woman, Devayānī. Shukadeva Goswami replied as follows. So now he's going to tell the history of how Yayati married Devayānī, the daughter of sage Śukrācārya. But Śarmiṣṭhā was innocent but angry by nature. One day she was walking with Devayānī and other friends in the palace of lotuses, flower trees, fruit trees, sweetly singing birds and bumblebees. These young girls came to the bank of a pond, left their clothing on the bank, and began sporting, throwing water on each other. The girls suddenly saw Lord Shiva and Parvati passing by on a bull. Ashamed, they quickly got out of the water and started wearing their dresses. Śarmiṣṭhā unknowingly wore Devayānī, thus angering Devayānī. Devayānī rebuked Śarmiṣṭhā. Just see the actions of this servant maid Śarmiṣṭhā. Etiquette, she has put on my dress just like a dog sucking ghee meant for its sacrifice. The Brahmins created the universe by their austerities to the Supreme Lord and keep him within their hearts. They show the path of good fortune. They are worshipable by the demigods and even by the Supreme Lord. Among the Brahmins, we are even more respectable because we are dynasty, and her demon father is our disciple. Yet she is put on like a Shudra taking charge of Vedic knowledge. Then Śarmiṣṭhā angrily said to Devayānī, "You beggar! You boast without knowing your position. Don't you Brahmins wait at our house for your livelihood like crows?" Śarmiṣṭhā, in anger, took away Devayānī's garments and threw her into a well. Yayāti saves Devayānī and Devayānī proposes marriage. When Śarmiṣṭhā went home, King Yayāti, who was in a hunting excursion, went to the well to drink water and saw naked Devayānī inside. He immediately gave her his upper cloth and kindly took her hands and lifted her out. Devayānī lovingly spoke to him, "O king, by accepting my hand, you have accepted. Let me not be touched by our relation has been arranged by providence. Because of falling in the well, I met you. When I cursed Kacha, he cursed me that I wouldn't get a Brahman husband." And the story of Kacha was once Kacha became the student of Śukrācārya, driving a person who has died untimely. Devayānī had Kacha as her husband, but he refused, since she was the daughter of his guru. She became angry and cursed him, saying that his knowledge would become useless. Then he cursed her, saying that she would not get a Brahman husband. King Yayāti did not like it, as it was a pratiloma marriage. But because he was attracted by Devayānī's beauty, and also considered that it had been arranged by the Supreme Will, he accepted her request. So that's where I made it up to last time. Now we'll be reading from 24 to 52. See a message that it 24. Gate rajane tatra smarudati pitu navadeya tata sarvam uktam Śarmiṣṭhaya kritam. Thereafter, when returned to his palace, Devayānī returned home crying and told her father Śukrācārya about all that had happened because of Śarmiṣṭhā. She told how she had been thrown into the well, but was saved by the king. Durmana Bhagavan Kavya Porohityam Hayan Stum Chakapotim Duhitra Sayayo. As Śukrācārya listened to what had happened to Devayānī, his mind was very much aggrieved. Condemning the profession of priesthood and praising the profession of unchavritti, collecting grains from the fields, he left home with his daughter. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When a Brahman adopts the profession of a kapota, or a pigeon, he lives by collecting grains from the fields. This is called unchavritti. A Brahman who takes to this unchavritti profession is called first class because he depends completely on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and does not beg from anyone. Although the profession of begging is allowed for a Brahman or sannyasi, one does better if he can avoid such profession and completely depend on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for maintenance. Śukrācārya was certainly very sorry that because of his daughter's complaint, he had to go to his disciple to beg some mercy, which he was obliged to do because he had accepted the profession of priesthood. In his heart, Śukrācārya did not like his profession, but since he had accepted it, he was obliged to go unwillingly to his disciple to settle the grievance submitted by his daughter. Vrishaparvatamāgyāya pratyannika vivakshitam gurum prasadayan murdhna padyo patita pati. King Vrishaparva understood that Śukrācārya was coming to chastise or curse him. Consequently, before Śukrācārya came to his house, Vrishaparva went out and fell down in the street at the feet of his guru and satisfied him, checking his wrath. Kshnarda Mayur Bhagavan Shishyan Vyachasta Bhargava Kamasya Kriyatang Rajan Nainam Tyaktum Ihotsahe. The powerful Śukrācārya was angry for a few moments, but upon being satisfied, he said to Vrishaparva, "My dear king, kindly fulfill the desire of Devayānī, for she is my daughter, and in this world I cannot give her up or neglect her." Purport. Sometimes a great personality like Śukrācārya cannot neglect sons and daughters, for sons and daughters are by nature dependent on their father, and the father has affection for them. Although Śukrācārya knew that the quarrel between Devayānī and Śarmiṣṭhā was childish, as Devayānī's father, he had to side with his daughter. He did not like to do this, but he was obliged to because of affection. He plainly that although he should have been for mercy for his daughter, affection, he could not avoid doing so. Tate tavastite praha Devayānī yogatam pitra datta yato yasye sanugayatu mam anu. After hearing Śukrācārya's request, Vrishaparva agreed to fulfill Devayānī's desire, and he awaited her words. Devayānī then expressed her desire as follows. "Whenever I marry by the order of my father, my friend Śarmiṣṭhā must go with me as my maidservant, along with her friends." She really wants to get entangled with Śarmiṣṭhā. Pitra datta Devayānī Śarmiṣṭhā sanugatada svanam tat sankatam vikshya tad arthasya sagoravam Devayānim paryacharat stri sahesrena dasavat. Vrishaparva wisely thought that Śukrācārya's displeasure would bring danger and that his pleasure would bring material gain. Therefore, he carried out Śukrācārya's order and served him like a slave. He gave his daughter Śarmiṣṭhā to Devayānī, and Śarmiṣṭhā served Devayānī like a slave, along with thousands of other women. Purport. In the beginning of these affairs concerning Śarmiṣṭhā and Devayānī, we saw that Śarmiṣṭhā had many friends. These friends became maidservants of Devayānī. When a girl married a Kshatriya king, it was customary for all her girlfriends to go with her to her husband's house. For instance, when Vasudeva married Devaki, the mother of Krishna, he married all 6 of her sisters, and she also had many friends who accompanied her. A king would maintain not only his wife, but also the many friends and maidservants of his wife. Some of these maidservants would become pregnant and give birth to children. Such children were accepted as dasi putra, the sons of maidservants, and the king would maintain them. The female population is always greater than the male, but since a woman needs to be protected by a man, the king would maintain many girls who acted either as friends or as maidservants of the queen. In the history of Krishna's household life, we find that Krishna married 16,108 wives. These were not maidservants, but direct queens, and Krishna expanded himself into 16,108 forms to maintain different establishments for each and every wife. This is not possible for ordinary men. Therefore, although the king had many servants and wives, not all of them had different establishments. Nahushaya sutam dattva sahas sharshtayoshana tamaha rajanchārmiṣṭhām adhastal nakarhichit. When Śukrācārya gave Devayānī in marriage to Yayāti, he had Śarmiṣṭhā go with her, but he warned the king, "My dear king, never allow this girl Śarmiṣṭhā to lie with you in bed." Vilokyo shanasim rajan Śarmiṣṭhā suprajam kvachit tam eva vavrihasi sakyaptem rito sati. O King Parikshit, upon seeing Devayānī with a nice son, Śarmiṣṭhā once approached King Yayāti at the appropriate time for conception. In a secluded place, she requested the king, the husband of her friend Devayānī, to enable her to have a son also. Her friend Devayānī? Isn't that a bit of a stretch? Raja putrartito patye dharmang cha vikshya dharmavit smarang cha chukra vacha kale dishtam eva vyapadyata. When Princess Śarmiṣṭhā begged King Yayāti for a son, the king was certainly aware of the principles of religion, and therefore he agreed to fulfill her desire. Although he remembered the warning of Śukrācārya, he thought of this union as a desire of the Supreme, and thus he had sex with Śarmiṣṭhā. Purport. King Yayāti was completely aware of the duty of a kshatriya. When a kshatriya is approached by a woman, he cannot deny her. This is a religious principle. Consequently, when Dharmaraj Yudhishthira saw Arjuna unhappy after Arjuna returned from Dwarka, he asked whether Arjuna had refused the woman or had begged for a son. Although Maharaj Yayati remembered Śukrācārya's warning, he could not refuse Śarmiṣṭhā. He thought it wise to give her a son, and thus he had sexual intercourse with her after her menstrual period. This kind of lust is not against religious principles, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 7:11. Dharma viruddha bhuteshu kamosmi. Sex life, not contrary to the principles of religion, is sanctioned by Krishna. Because Śarmiṣṭhā, the daughter of a king, Yayati for a son, their combination was but an act of religion. Yadam chatum chaiva devayānī druhyum chanum chapurum cha Śarmiṣṭhā varsha parvani. Devayānī gave birth to Yadu and Turvasu, and Śarmiṣṭhā gave birth to Druhyu, Anu, and Pūru. Garbha sambhavamassurya bharturigyayamani Devayānī putureham yayo krodha vimurchita. When the proud Devayānī understood from outside sources that Śarmiṣṭhā was pregnant by her husband, she was frenzied with anger. Thus she departed for her father's house. Yam anugata kami vobir upamantrayan na prasadaitung sheke padasamvahanadibhi. King Yayati, who was very lusty, followed his wife, caught her, and tried to appease her by speaking pleasing words and massaging her feet, but he could not satisfy her by any means. Shukrastam ahakupita stri kamanrita purusha tam jara vashatam manda virupa karanindrinam. Śukrācārya was extremely angry. "You untruthful fool, lusting after women, you have done great wrong," he said. "I therefore curse you to be attacked and disfigured by old age and invalidity." Shri Yayati Ruvacha Atriptosmyadya kamanam brahmandu hitarismate vyatyasatam yata kamam vayasayo bhasyati. King Yayati said, O learned, worshipable Brahman, I have not yet satisfied my lusty desires with your daughter. Śukrācārya then replied, You exchange your old age with someone who will agree to transfer his youth to you. Purport. When King Yayati said that he had not yet satisfied his lusty desires with Śukrācārya's daughter, Śukrācārya saw that it was against the interests of his own daughter for Yayati to continue in old age and invalidity, for certainly his lusty daughter would not be satisfied. Therefore, Śukrācārya blessed his son-in-law by saying that he could exchange his old age for someone else's youth. He indicated that if he would exchange his youth for Yayati's old age, Yayati could continue to enjoy sex with Devayānī. Iti labda vyavastana putram jeshtam avochata yado tata prati chemam jaram dehi nijang vaya. When Yayati received this benediction from Śukrācārya, he requested his eldest son, My dear son Yadu, please give me your youth in exchange for my old age and invalidity. How could a father ask that from his son? Mata maha kritam vatsa natripto vishayeshvaham vayasa bhavadiyena rangsye kati payasama. And how could a father say all this stuff to his son? My dear son, I am not yet satisfied in my sexual desires. Is that cringe or what? But if you are kind to me, you can take the old age given by your maternal grandfather, and I may take your youth, so that you may enjoy and I may take your youth so that I may enjoy life for a few years more. Purport. This is the nature of lusty desires. In Bhagavad Gita 7:20, it is said, Kāmaistaister hrita jnana. When one is too attached to sense gratification, he actually loses his sense. The word hrita jnana refers to one who has lost his sense. Here's an example. A father shamelessly asked his son to exchange youth for old age. Of course, the entire world is under such illusion. Therefore, it is said that everyone is pramata, or exclusively mad. Exclusively. Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma. When one becomes almost like a madman, he indulges in sex and sense gratification. Sex and sense gratification can, however, and one achieves perfection when he has no desires for sex. This is possible when one is fully Krishna conscious. Yadavadi mama cheta Krishna padara vinde nava nava rasa dhaman yudatam rantum asit. Tadavadi batanari sangame smaryamane bhavati mukha vikara shushta nishti vanam cha. Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with distaste. That's from Padavali, I think. Padyavali. Who wrote that? This is a famous verse. I just can't remember who wrote it. Sexual desire can be stopped only when one is Krishna conscious and not otherwise. As long as one has desires for sex, one must change his body and transmigrate from one body to another to enjoy sex in different species or forms. But although the forms may differ, the business of sex is the same. Therefore it is said, Puna punascharvita charvananam. Those who are very much attached to sex transmigrate from one body to another with the same business of chewing the chewed, tasting sex enjoyment as a dog, sex enjoyment as a hog, sex enjoyment as a demigod, and so on. Shri Yadur Uvacha Notsahe Jarasastanum Antara Praptaya Tava Aviditva Sukam Gramyam Vaitrishnam Naiti Purusha. Just checking everything's still running okay. Hari Bol, Prajumna Prabhu, Mantra Murti Mataji, Rajbhuvan Yadav. Hare Krishna. Okay, no problem, Prajumna Prabhu. Yadu replied, my dear father, Yadu replied, my dear father, you have already achieved old age, although you also were a young man. But I do not welcome your old age and invalidity, for unless one enjoys materialness, one cannot attain renunciation. Purport. Renunciation of material enjoyment is the ultimate goal of human life. Therefore, the Varnashram institution is most scientific. It aims at giving one the facility to return home back to Godhead, which one cannot do without completely renouncing all connections with the material world. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Niskinchanasya Bhagavad Bhajanon Mukasya. One who wants to go back home, back to Godhead, must be niskinchan, free from all affinity for material enjoyment. Brahmanupashamashrayam. Unless one is fully renounced, one cannot engage in devotional service or stay in Brahman. Devotional service is rendered on the Brahman platform. Therefore, unless one attains the Brahman platform, a spiritual platform, one cannot engage in devotional service. Or in other words, a person engaged in devotional service is already on the Brahman platform. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samititaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. It's Bhagavad Gita 14:26. If one attains devotion, he is certainly liberated. Generally, unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation. Varnashram therefore gives the opportunity for gradual elevation. Yadu, the son of Maharaj Yayāti, explains that he was unable to give up his youth, for he wanted to use it to attain the renounced order in the future. Maharaj Yadu was different from his brothers. As stated in the next verse, Turvashus chodita pitra druhyush chanush chabharata pratyachakyur adharmadgya. Maharaj Yadu's brothers refused to accept their father's proposal because they were not completely aware of dharma. To accept orders that follow religious principles, especially the orders of one's father, is very important. Therefore, when the brothers of Maharaj Yadu refused their father's order, this was certainly irreligious. Maharaj Yadu's refusal, however, was religious. As stated in the 10th canto, Yadosh Chadharma Shilaya. Maharaj Yadu was completely aware of the principles of religion. The ultimate principle of religion is to engage oneself in devotional service to the Lord. Maharaj Yadu was very eager to engage himself in the Lord's service. Impediment. During youth, the material desire to enjoy the material senses is certainly present, and unless one fully satisfies these lusty desires in youth, there is a chance of one's being disturbed in rendering service to the Lord. We have actually seen that many sannyasis who accept sannyas prematurely, not having satisfied their material desires, fall down because they are disturbed. Therefore, the general process is to go through grihastha life and vanaprastha life, and finally come to sannyas and devote oneself completely to the service of the Lord. Maharaj Yadu was ready to accept his father and exchange youth for old age because he was confident that the youth taken by his father would be returned. But because this exchange would delay his complete engagement in devotional service, he did not want to accept his father's old age, for he was eager to achieve freedom from disturbances. Moreover, among the descendants of Yadu would be Lord Krishna. Therefore, because Yadu was eager to see the Lord's appearance in this dynasty as soon as possible, Yadu refused to accept his father's proposal. This was not irreligious, however, because Yadu's purpose was to serve the Lord. Because Yadu was a faithful servant of the Lord, Lord Krishna appeared in his dynasty. As confirmed in the prayers of Kunti, Yado Priyasyanvaye. Yadu was very dear to Krishna, who was therefore eager to descend in Yadu's dynasty. In conclusion, Maharaj Yadu should not be considered a dharma ignorant of religious principles, as the next verse designates his. He shouldn't have been ignorant of religious principles, as the next verse designates his brothers. Sorry. In conclusion, Maharaj Yadu should not be considered a dharmagya, ignorant of religious principles, as the next verse designates his brothers. He was like the 4 Sanaks, the Chatusan, who refused the order of their father Brahma for the sake of a better cause. Because the 4 Kumaras wanted to engage themselves completely in the service of the Lord as brahmacharis, their refusal to obey their father's order was not irreligious. Turvashuschodita pitra druhyushchanushcha bharata pratyachakyur adagya hyanitye nityabuddhaya. O Maharaj Parikshit, Yayati similarly requested his son Turvasu, Druhyu, and Anu to exchange their youth for his old age. But because they were unaware of religious principles, they thought that their flickering youth was eternal, and therefore they refused to carry out their father's order. Aprachattanayam purum vayasonam gunadhikam natvam agra javadvatsa mam pratyakhyatumarhasi. King Yayati then requested Pūru, who was younger than these 3 brothers but more qualified. My dear son, do not be disobedient like your elder brothers, for that is not your duty. Shri Pūruruvad Konu loke manushendra pituratma kritam puman pratikartum kshamo yasya prasadad vindate param. Pūru replied, O your majesty, who in this world can repay his debt to his father? By the mercy of one's father, one gets the human form of life, which can enable one to become an associate of the Supreme Lord. Purport. The father gives the seed of the body, and this seed gradually grows and develops until ultimately attains the developed human body with consciousness higher than that of the animals. In the human body, one can be elevated to the higher planets, and furthermore, if one cultivates Krishna consciousness, one can return home back to Godhead. This important human body is obtained by the grace of the Father, and therefore everyone is indebted to his father. Of course, in other lives, one also gets a father and mother. Even cats and dogs have fathers and mothers. But in the human form, the father and mother can award their son the greatest benediction by teaching him to become a devotee. When one becomes a devotee, he achieves the greatest benediction because he completely averts the repetition of birth and death. Therefore, the father who trains his child in Krishna consciousness is the most benevolent father in this world. It is said, Janame janame saba pita matapai, Krishna guru nahi mile bhajo hari e. Everyone gets a father and mother, but if one gets the benediction of Krishna and Guru, he can conquer material nature and return home back to Godhead. Uttamash chintitam kuryat proktakari tu madhyama adhamo shraddhaya kuryat akarto charitam pitu. A son who acts by anticipating what his father wants him to do is first class. Who acts upon receiving his father's order is second class. And one who executes his father's order irreverentially is third class. But a son who refuses his father's order is like his father's stool. Purport. Pūru, so Pūru just called all his brothers, all his elder brothers, his father's stool. Pūru, Yayati's last son, immediately accepted his father's proposal, for although he was the youngest, he was very qualified. Pūru thought, I should have accepted my father's proposal before he asked, but I did not. Therefore, I am not a first-class son. I am second-class. But I do not wish to become the lowest type of son who is compared to his father's stool. One Indian poet has spoken of putra and mutra. Putra means son, and mutra means urine. Both a son and urine come from the same genitals. If a son is an obedient devotee of the Lord, he is called putra, or a real son. Otherwise, if he is not learned and is not a devotee, a son is nothing better than urine. Iti pramudita puru pratyagrinajjaram pitu so pitar vayasa kaman yatavaj jugjuse nripa. Shukadeva Goswami said, In this way, O Maharaj Parikshit, the son named Pūru was very pleased to accept the old age of his father, Yayāti, who took the youth of his son and enjoyed this material world as he required. So Maharaj Yayāti, Pūru is the son of Śarmiṣṭhā. And so Maharaj Yayāti asked his son Pūru to give him his youth so that he could enjoy sex with his stepmom, with Devayānī. That is so messed up. Sorry. Saptadvipa pati sangyak pitri vat palayan praja yato pajosham visayan ju vyahatendriya. Thereafter, King Yayāti became the ruler of the entire world, consisting of 7 islands, and ruled the citizens exactly like a father. Because he had taken the youth of his son, his senses were unimpaired, and he enjoyed as much material happiness as he desired. Devayānī anudinam manovag dehavastubhi preyasa paramang pritim uvaha preyasiraha. In secluded places, engaging her mind, words, body, and various paraphernalia, Devayānī, the dear wife of Maharaj Yayāti, always brought her husband the greatest possible transcendental bliss. Ayajar yagya purusham kratubir bhuri dakshinay sarva deva maya devam sarva veda mayam harim. Yayāti performed various sacrifices in which he offered abundant gifts to the Brahmins to satisfy the Supreme Lord Hari, who is the reservoir of all the demigods and the object of all Vedic knowledge. Yasmin idam virachitam vyomni vavali naneva bhatina bhati swapnamaya manorataha. The Supreme Lord Vasudeva, who created the cosmic manifestation, exhibits him as all-pervading, like the sky that holds clouds. And when the creation is annihilated, everything enters into the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and varieties are no longer manifested. Purport. As stated by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 7:19, Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavan mang prapadyate vasudeva sarvam iti sa mahatma sadurlabha. After many births, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva is one with the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Absolute Truth. Everything is in him, everything is in him in the beginning, and at the end, all manifestations enter into him. He is situated in everyone's heart, sarvasva chaham hridisannavishta, and from him everything has emanated, janma dasya yataha. All material manifestations, however, are temporary. The word swapna means dreams, maya means illusion, and manorata means mental creations. Dreams, illusions, and mental creations are temporary. Similarly, all material creation is temporary, but Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the eternal absolute truth. Tam eva hridi vinyasya vasudeva guhashayam narayanam aniyangsam nirashir ayajat prabhum. Without material desires, Maharaj Yayati worshipped the Supreme Lord who is situated in everyone's heart as Narayan and is invisible to material eyes, although existing everywhere. Purport. King Yayati, although externally seeming very fond of material enjoyment, was internally thinking of becoming an eternal servant of the Lord. Evam varsha sahasrani manashashtar manasukam vidadhano pinatripyat sarvabhauma karindriyai. Although Maharaj Yayati was the king of the entire world and he engaged his mind and five senses in enjoying material possessions for 1,000 years, he was unable to be satisfied. Purport. The word kad indriya, or unpurified senses, can be purified if one engages the senses and the mind in Krishna consciousness. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tat paratvaina nirmilam. That's Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 19:170. No, that's anyways, whatever. One must be freed from all designations. I need to not read it whenever it's in square brackets. One must be freed from all designations. When one identifies himself with the material world, his senses are impure. But when one achieves realization and identifies himself as a servant of the Lord, his senses are purified immediately. Engagement of the purified senses in the service of the Lord is called bhakti. Hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchyate. One may enjoy the senses for many thousands of years, but unless one purifies the senses, one cannot be happy. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 9th canto, 18th chapter of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, entitled King Yayati Regains His Youth. Oh, and just whenever it has a reference in square brackets, it means that was not in the original Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, but somebody else added it in afterwards for this website. Yeah, and Chaitanya Charitamrita quotes this verse, but the verse isn't from Chaitanya Charitamrita, that's why. All right, so tomorrow we will be reading chapter 19. Let's see what we're gonna read tomorrow. King Yayati achieves liberation. So Yayati becomes disguised means disgusted. Yayati becomes disgusted with sense enjoyment and tells the story of a he-goat and she-goat to Devayānī, which is his personal experience with Devayānī. Then Yayati's realizations, and Yayati and Devayānī attain the Lord's abode. All right, so see you tomorrow for that. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Oh, cool. Thanks. That's where that verse comes from. Thanks, Rohit Radhakrishnan ji. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Shishi Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari, Shishi Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai. Shri Govinda Gopinath Madan Mohan Ju Ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashata Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Narayana Gosai Maharaj Śrīla Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupara Shatarashata Shmar Bhaktivedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupara Shatarashata Shmar Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupara Shatarashata Shmar Bhakti Vigyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupara Shatarashata Shmar Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Mahabhagavat Srila Gorksharas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath. Shri Jeev Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath Sharda Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai. Nama Chai Lahai Ras Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gora Mandala Vraja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Shri Radha Kunda Shama Kunda ki jai. Shri Yamuna Devi Ganga Devi ki jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Purna Yoga Maya ki jai. Shri Kopeshwar Mahadev ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shinitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashacha. Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi Satyavataya Namo Namaha. Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayavacha. Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat Pranam everybody. See you all tomorrow. Dandavat Pranam Rohit Radha Krishnan ji and Madhavi Didi, Bhavatarani Mataji, Nri Hari Prabhu, everybody that's here, Savitri Didi. Hare Krishna.